Hello, welcome everyone back to Connection Sports Media Podcast. I'm Cody, joined by my good friend Steve. We made it to episode 2. Steve, how's it feel, man?
This is exactly 2 more episodes of podcast than I've ever done in my life. So, hey, we did it.
We did it. We made it. Let's give ourselves a nice round of applause. What a time. We've done more than the Cubs and White Sox have over the last 24 hours. Look at us.
24 hours is giving them a little bit of a long leash, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So tonight we are joined by a good friend of mine. I would consider him at this point a good friend. And I also work with him. And most people would know him if they listen or watch the CHGO Cubs podcast. And we're going to talk to him for about 45 minutes. And then there's a few newsy things related to the industry that we're going to discuss after he leaves. But I want to welcome my good friend, Luke Stuckmeyer, to the show. What's going on, man?
What's up? First of all, that's a real tease. You have me and you're dragging people all the way to the end to get to the good stuff. That's not fair. Second of all, I thought you were going to come on and say we are blessed to have Luke Stuckmeyer on the podcast instead.
Oh, this is great.
Luke's here.
This is great. Just giving Cody all the crap is what I live for.
And Steve, I don't know, but I don't know if you know this, but on our CHGO podcast, somebody thought my name was Steve. So I have an obvious shirt that says Steve. So
that's great.
Send me your size. We'll see if we can get a second one made up.
I listened to, because I'm a White Sox fan, so I listened to one of the crossover episodes once with you and Sean and Herb, and that kept coming up. I was like, why are they talking to me right now? Because it was Cody saying it, and Cody and I went to college together, so I was very confused for about an hour, but I made it through.
Yeah. There was somebody in the chat just kept putting comments like, Steve and Cody, stop talking about. We were like, who's he talking to?
Live radio and television and podcasting, it's always an adventure. We'll put it.
That's right. It is. We'll do it live.
We'll do it live. Anyway, I'm sorry for my bad introduction, Luke. I will. I know you don't care, but I will make it better next time. All right. Our good friend Michael Collada has already joined, Luke. He says, just want you to know Ricketts is also cheap on this podcast too. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Just, he is here for every show. I appreciate it. So we're not going to talk about the Cubs, though I have joked around with Steve, that if Correa or someone signs with the Cubs during the show, we will have to immediately stop, and then Luke will have to go do the CHGO Cubs podcast because that's what we're paid to do.
I understand.
So
if breaking sports news interrupts this, I will be glad to have been a part of it.
Yeah. Right. So what I was thinking is, if that were to happen, what a moment it would be for this show to get the reaction of me and Luke right away.
Yeah.
But also, I'd just be very, 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 very surprised. So that's why we're doing this, because I've lost basically all hope, but whatever.
Talk about anything but baseball.
Yeah. We're just not going to talk about the Cubs or the White Sox. And I feel like it's like good for us right now. Like, especially me, because I'm just like, I'm going through the roller coaster, Luke. Like, this.
I know.
I'm going through it.
Steve's got it though, man. His team's supposed to be winning the World Series, and they're sitting out there doing nothing.
Mike Clevenger is going to save the White Sox.
Yeah, sure. Sure he is.
Well, Cats will fix them.
Right. The White Sox got rid of Abreu and added Clevenger, and somehow things are fixed, right?
Yeah. That's the way it works.
Got it.
That's the way it works. Basically, stay healthy is the White Sox way, as some of the 108 guys like to say. We'll get through it together.
That's right.
Okay. So I guess to start off, so obviously this podcast is all about like the media industry and just how we got into it. And like, I've sat at work and listened to Luke tell me a few stories. He's told me some stories about, Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood and having to like work with those guys while working at NBC. But like, I've never really got to know Luke in terms of like just the whole process of getting to NBC or CSN, as like a lot of people know. So like, Luke, I'm gonna need you to give us the deets, man, because like I know it's a long story.
You said 45 minutes. We're down to 40 already. You don't have that much time. It's a long road.
All right. Well,
all right. I'll do the summarized version. All right.
Okay.
So when I was in high school, my first cousin was working. Well, when I was in early high school, like freshman year or something like that, maybe 8th grade. My first cousin was at the University of Colorado, and he started interning at the NBC station in the sports department in Denver. He met somebody, started interning. By the time he was like a junior in college, he was now a producer at that TV station. He was producing sportscasts for the NBC station in Denver. By the time I got to college a couple years later, I had now decided, well, my cousin Mark is going to Broncos games and hanging, meeting John Elway. Like, I was a Broncos fan too at that time. And I was like, and he's getting paid for it. Like, I don't know. I had no idea what I was. Awesome. I was not a good student. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like,
you sucked at math like me.
Yeah. I can't math and I can't science. So I was like, well, all right, let's try that. So when I went to Valpo, I went into broadcasting, although at that time it was just communications. So really nothing. And then my cousin, by the time I got to my junior year, was now the executive sports producer at that station in Denver and in charge of internships. So after my junior year, before my senior year at Valpo, I drove out to Denver, lived with my cousin and his wife, and interned for the summer at the NBC station there. So, and I went to his wife worked for the Rockies. His first wife worked for the Rockies. So we went to every first game the Rockies ever played at Mile High. In the meantime, I was interning at the NBC in Denver. I had an anchor there who was awesome. He recently passed away, Les Shapiro. And every night he would sit me down. We had 7 or 8 interns, right? Mm-hmm. And you could do as little as you wanted to. If you wanted to just show up and watch games, you could show up and watch games. Previous interns at this station, Chris Fowler and some other big name guys had gone through the same exact station. And they told me, they said, when Chris Fowler was here, he used to make tapes of himself and try and do the sports in the mirror every night. And I was like, oh, that's a little far for me. But they said you should learn how to write scripts. So the anchor would make me write 3 scripts every night. And at the end, after he did a sportscast, 10:30 at night, he'd go through these 3 scripts that I'd take off an Associated Press wire or whatever and rewrite them my own way. He would tear them to shreds, word by word, tear them to shreds. And that's how I learned the importance of writing for television and how to write scripts and how sports was different than news, how it was different than print journalism, how it was different than radio. So I did that. Then I went back to Valpo, interned. I used to drive on Tuesdays and Thursdays to South Bend, like an hour, and worked intern at WSBT in South Bend. Did a lot less for that internship. It was a lot more watching sports and just kind of hanging out. But I had a resume tape between the 2 stations. Graduated college, and 9 months later, I had 0 job offers.
Feels
that's about right.
Yeah, 0. I can remember driving to Rockford. And again, not everybody's graduating college with a resume tape with John Elway was in it. I was doing sportscasts on a big TV station set, right? I had a great background. Nothing. Why? Well, one of the reasons was I looked 14. Okay. So I really honestly looked 14. So I drove to all the Rockford stations. And I can remember the one station I went to, I told the guy I was coming. He said, come on. I showed up and he basically was like, yeah, I got your tape. And then he just looked at me blankly and I'm like, well, do you want to look at it or talk about it? No, I just drove back home to Arlington Heights. It was like, what? I sent tapes everywhere. Scottsbluff, Nebraska, you name it, nothing. Finally, I got a call 9 months in from a TV station in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on Lake Superior in Marquette, Michigan. And it's market I think it's 180 out of 202, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy's like, hey, this is so-and-so. I know you applied for a sports mission. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm not calling you about that, but I do have an opening as a news producer. And I was like, what do you mean news producer? And he's like, well, you would be the weekend news producer for our weekend newscast. So you would make the rundowns, produce the whole show, sit in the booth, edit the entire show on 3/4 tape. I'm like, what do you mean the entire show? He's like, every tape for the show. I was like, okay. So I was like, well, they wouldn't even pay for a hotel. Okay. Right. So I drove like 8.5 hours. It's like 3.5 hours straight north of Green Bay.
Oh, wow.
I got there and I got there the night before and it was like a Motel 8 and
they left the lights on.
They got like 3 hotels in town and a blizzard was going through and it was like 35 below zero.
Oh,
and Lord. I had this old car that I had in college and I'm like, this is my first ever like interview. Like I got up every hour on the hour and started this car. So I knew it would start in the morning. Cause I'm like, my car's going to die and I'm not going to get to the, so I was sleeping in the car. I was turning the car on. I wake up in the morning and there's 23 inches of snow on the ground. And I'm like, so I called the station and I'm like, hey, so my name's Luke. I was supposed to come in and meet Steve. I was supposed to meet Steve Asplin, the news director. And I'm assuming the interview's canceled. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I mean, there's like 2 feet of snow on my car. And she's like, come on in.
Welcome to Michigan.
Yeah. Welcome. All right. That should have been my first clue, right, guys? That should have been when I was like, I'm out. And I got there, interviewed. The guy offers me this job. So I made $13,000 for my first job producing. And I was editing all the tapes. And I mean, and then I was a news reporter during the week, which was by far the worst thing I've ever done in my life. You know, there is no job that's less rewarding than being a news reporter in the middle of nowhere where you're just going to like, if you're lucky, you're going to a town hall meeting.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's interesting because Champaign, I live down in Champaign and the market size, it's down there and it's definitely a feeder station too, but it's not 180.
It's not Marquette, Michigan.
It's not Marquette, Michigan.
If Champaign had called, I would have walked.
It's always people kind of complain on social media sometimes because the good anchors and the good reporters aren't here very long because that's what kind of sucks about local television and local radio television more so than radio. You have to move. You have to be willing to move up. And going from Marquette, Michigan to where was the next step then?
So the next step was Lincoln, Nebraska, which I won't do the whole thing here, but there was some blackmail involved there. There were some payments of checks to get out of there. I mean, literally craziness to leave a $13,000 job where it snowed 400 inches the year I did weather.
Wow. I think you showed me the picture. You showed me the picture at work
when
of the feet of snow. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep in mind, like when we have our worst winter ever, we get like 37, 40 inches maybe of snow here. So 400 inches is like, it's the snowiest place in America. That's not like,
oh, wow.
It's snowier than Buffalo. So I left there. I got to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was there for 97, 98, 99, I think 2000. And then from there to San Antonio. San Antonio was up until we launched and got the job in Chicago, which was Labor Day 2004. So it was a full 10 years of small market TV before I got back to Chicago. And realistically, that's all I ever went into it for, was to be there when the Cubs won the World Series, to cover Chicago sports. I didn't think either one was necessarily realistic, but, and you know, they weren't, but it turned out well for me. Like I got really lucky. So I feel very fortunate for that, but the stops in between, you guys both know, like it's not, if you're not into it and you're going into this business, forget it. Just walk away now, because the paychecks are horrible. The hours are worse. The holidays are miserable. The job is lonely and unforgiving. Like it's just there aren't, all I could say is I met some lifelong friends along the way. And I'm glad I actually took that path, because everything that could go wrong in television was going to go wrong before I got to Chicago. Like teleprompters going down have never, ever bothered me on television, because I did 4 years of it at the UP where it was going backwards. It was going sideways, and, that we were off the air. The bars were on. I mean, you can't imagine the stuff that I saw in just in Marquette, let alone, you mentioned live TV. It's like some of the craziest stuff you could ever imagine happening on live TV happened on live TV. So you were ready for it by the time you got anywhere to get out of there.
Those small market stations, you can sometimes tell when there's somebody that jumps into a big market and hasn't had that small market experience, to where they're kind of green, and they're like, one little thing goes wrong and everything else crumbles around them. It's like, you've got to be calm, cool, and collected at all times. Now, I've always kind of stuck to radio, but even then, board hopping live sports, something will go wrong every broadcast. You just kind of have to deal with it. And there's games where I called a game via a cell phone, doing play-by-play for baseball in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, literally on a flip phone, just calling play-by-play, like making a phone call. But that's what you have to do. And there's always, everybody's got a story that is of like, something failed, but we made it work. And we aired it. Should we have? Maybe.
I'm glad it was before YouTube. Let me say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that said, like, I am interested your take now on, like, because CHGO, obviously, it's so much different than what you did at NBC or CSN, or obviously before that. Like, when I'd love to know, like, the process of, like, I don't know, when Kevin and Jake came to you and like told you about this, and like you're like, weekends off, really? Like, what is this?
Well, everything has changed so much. Like, you guys know, like stuff I would have learned in college is so archaic at this point that it's like, it's not even the same business. Just the change from local TV the first time, from small market to the next one, was a change. Then the adjustment to the next market was the same. But when I changed from San Antonio, which was market 37, and had, you had an NBA team, a AA baseball team, covered the Cowboys, Texas, all that stuff. Going from there to an all sports network was as drastic as it was going from Comcast Sportsnet, CSN, NBC to what we're doing now. It's an easier adjustment for me now because I'm older and have done more of it. But like that adjustment from a 3-minute sportscast or a 5-minute sportscast where I'm editing all my own stuff and every word, every second matters, to an hour-long sportscast, hosting it multiple times a night, craziness, right? Yeah. So when they kind of approached me about this, first of all, I wasn't doing any media stuff anymore. I'd stopped doing, after our son was born, I stopped doing sports at Channel 2. So I'd been doing 3-4 days a week at CBS 2. And then I wasn't doing that anymore once our son was born. And so I was pretty close to being like, I don't need the business anymore. Like, I'm done with it. It's over. It's not the same as it was. Time to move on. And then Jake calls, and it's someone I respected who I worked with. And it was like, well, this sounds, it sounds fun. and you're asking about like the difference between the two. I think, that's one, it probably happened before that, but it's when I accepted that things weren't the same as they used to be. Like comparing Comcast Sportsnet to NBC Sports is apples to watermelons. It's not the same product. It's not, they're not doing the same thing. So when Jake told me about this, I said, well, it's different. And if you're not changing, then you might as well get out of the business. Right. Because there are people still doing sports at NBC Sports, but they aren't doing sports night. They aren't doing sports rise. They aren't really doing shows. It's pre and post game. So there are people still doing the job I did. And there are people still doing the job at local TV, but local TV is not necessarily the same right now either. And this was, I'm not going to say it was like some bold new idea, but we're different than anything that's out there. We're a hybrid of different things that are out there. And just the idea to talk about it. It wasn't the weekends. I mean, the weekends off were a drawing point to me, but I had built up enough seniority at NBC that I was off weekends anyways at that point, right? Unless I was covering the Blackhawks, which at that point at the end I wasn't anymore. So I did work weekends for sports or filling in for Pat Boyle or Chuck or whoever. But if I wasn't doing that, I had weekends off anyway. So that was part of it. But our schedule is certainly more flexible. Our life to work balance is totally different, right? And there's less production to it.
Yeah, it really is. It's the production is a lot different.
We're
doing the same thing basically right now. Yeah, we're using the same platform as we do at work, right?
I just think you got to be changing. Like right now, Cody, how different is it from what you were doing 5 years ago? Totally different, right? Or even when you're doing a podcast with a friend, right? It's different.
Yeah.
And it'll be just as different in 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I just feel like podcasting is so much more popular now than it was even 5 years ago. And I feel like 5 years ago was like the beginning of it really taking off. Like 2016, 2017, I feel like is when podcasts started really like blowing up. And now it's like everyone has a podcast.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a podcast, what the fuck are you doing with your life at this point? You know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't really have my own podcast, but
I've been busy, Cody. Leave me alone.
I'd listen to it. Long.
I know my wife says I should do it. I'm like, I don't have time for another podcast. What are you talking about?
You would totally do a great food one, Stuck. Like I know your passion for food. I don't know how you would do it. And I don't know how like the episodes would be.
It's not necessary. I will say this, at every stage of change, there's always pushback from people. I've pushed back on every bit of it, whether it was going from VHS, from 3/4 tape to VHS, from VHS to Super V, from Super V to DVC Pro, from DVC Pro to on and on and on. Like it continues to change to linear editing, right? Yeah. Then the whole online thing came about and was like, what? Then podcasts started coming out. I was like, this. Actually, Twitter came and I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. I was like, I'll do it, but like we're wasting. I was at spring training and I think Patrick Mooney was there at the time. I think it was his first year. And they convinced us we had to do Twitter. And I signed up. Chuck Garfine had been doing it for like maybe 6 months or a year already. And I was like, this is crazy. Who's reading this? And why am I giving my information? I kept saying to anybody that would listen, I was like, why am I doing what the newspapers are doing? They're all dead. They're giving their information away for free online before they can charge you for it. Why would we give all of our information away before people can pay to see it on television?
Yeah.
They didn't listen. We all kept doing it, and they're all out of jobs, you know?
Yeah.
But
I remember those days.
I don't get podcasts necessarily, but I see how popular they are and how fun they can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so funny that you say that about Twitter because like I used to think kind of the same thing. Like why do like I would get like for sports I would get like all the like beat people who would like tweet updates of like what's going on or whatever. But then after that I'd be like why are you giving everything away though? It's just so much. So yeah.
Even the beat writers, like when I covered the Blackhawks and did the sideline stuff, he'd go to the playoffs, and after every goal, penalty, scoring opportunity, you would watch the 7 beat writers to your left. The computer screens would go bing, 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 and each one would update with the same exact thing. And I kept thinking to myself, should I be doing this? What isn't everybody watching this on the TV station that I'm talking on? Like, why am I sending out? Who am I sending these things out to? And I still think that's crazy. Like Bears up 7-0, 25-yard run. Like what?
Yeah. Well, now
that's not where Twitter's valuable. Twitter's valuable for finding information now.
Yeah.
Real information.
Well, and now it's changed from instead of just telling people what the score is, now people are putting out their hot takes. You know what I mean? Like that's now what people are doing, you know? Like,
that's not much of a new now thing. I find myself checking Twitter at games. So I go to a lot of Illini basketball games, and I'll check games for the beat writers to see what they're hearing on press row, because we don't get that analysis that we get on television. So like if there's somebody's not been in the game for a while, or like, for example, when Illinois lost to Penn State on Saturday, Matthew Mayer didn't play most of the second half. And that's one of the things, you're in the stands, you don't notice that as much because you don't see them all the time. You don't see the names crossed, but they were kept, you could go to that Twitter, you can go to the Illini beat and see who was in and out. And being up in row 22 of the 200 level, you can't really see it from up there. But that's the reason I use it in games when the signal works at the State Farm Center, which isn't always great either.
but you don't need a score update.
No, that's right in front of my face.
The score update's coming anywhere you want to possibly find a score update. So like the 5-minute score updates, I get what you're saying. Like there's information, even watching it on television, you might find something from a local beat writer that you won't hear over the broadcast.
Right. Oh yeah.
See, and like Twitter for me now, like here, I'll just explain my brand, right? Like Luke, you know my brand. Like it's everything is either really great or really awful, right? And I like really play that up. It's not that it's fake, but like I'm really actually feeling that way about the Cubs more often than not. And like that's how people, whether you're a fan or you're just like a personality, like that's how people have made careers now. And like that's honest to me, that's kind of like what Twitter is basically doing for people now to help build their careers if that's the path that they take. So
Cody's mad at Wilson Contreras. He told us on the podcast today, but he's very much the Wilson Contreras of Chicago Cubs podcasting. He wears his emotion right here.
Right on the sleeves.
You know, he carries.
Well, now you guys got two Will Contreras in the division with William and Wilson coming against you. Yeah. It's gonna be a rough one. But we said we weren't gonna talk about baseball.
No, we're
not talking about
baseball.
My bad. We're not talking about baseball.
That's all right. That's all right. It's just upsetting. So, Luke, you've been talking about sports a lot, and you kind of got ready to get into it before college, even early in high school. What would you be doing if you weren't talking sports?
Steve, I have no idea. Honestly, I would only guess. So when the first job was ending and I was writing a check to leave a station for no reason, I was like, I think I'm getting out of this. Like I'd been there staying there 3.5, 4 years, was way beyond what anybody else stayed at a station like that. I had changed every role. You know, I'd been news producer, news reporter, weather anchor, finally sports, like the last 6 months of that. Right. And I was just kind of like, this isn't worth it. This isn't what I got. I got into it to cover Chicago's real sporting events. I didn't get into it to cover, some guy that's picking up skeleton, Michigan, 35 miles from here. Like, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so if I had walked away, I probably would have gone back to school and become a teacher of some kind. Maybe even a media teacher, like some sort of broadcasting teacher. I don't think they really existed then, but I think I would have gone back to the teaching route or something like that. But I don't know. I also you went into radio, Steve. I didn't choose TV because I wanted to be on television. That's why I didn't care about podcasting or television or radio. I just wanted to talk about sports for a living, right? I didn't want to have to math and I didn't want to have to science. And so the idea of talking about sports for a living was what I really was interested in. So if I could have found another way for that path, maybe I would have gone that way, but I think I probably would have, if I had finally quit, I probably would have walked away and been a teacher at some point. Almost nobody that I worked with at that first job is in television.
Wow.
Nobody. One guy is a reporter at in Houston at an ABC affiliate. There's one, the sports guy is still there, and that's it. They're all, they all bailed out after like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Everybody gets out because the money sucks, and you're working on every holiday.
I'm trying to think of the people that when I did sports down at Eastern, other than Cody, I'm trying to think of some of the other people that are still in media. It's only a couple, really. I have a friend of mine works over at Marquee. And then a friend is a sports director. She's a sports director or sports reporter in Ohio somewhere. But a lot of the other people that did the play-by-play at Eastern, that were in the sports department there. One guy was working in government, another, and that was pretty much it. I mean, it's tough. It's one of the hardest industries to get into, but once you're in it, it's hard to turn away.
Yeah. Even my second job in Lincoln, there's only one person there that I believe is still in television. It's the weather guy is still there.
And but Lincoln, that's a good market for sports too.
Oh yeah, it's a really good market. Yeah, you'd rather be there than Omaha, even though Omaha's a bigger market because you have the university. But yeah, like even like news director, GM on down, nobody's in television. They're all out. Wow. So it's definitely not for everybody.
No, that is for sure.
So, obviously ups and downs, right? Like throughout, like what was the lowest point? And then what was your highest point where you felt like you had, I guess, reached a point in your career where you felt like you might have had like the coolest moment or maybe felt the most success?
Well, I mean, like the pinnacle was covering the World Series, not for what I did at the World Series. Like nothing, I don't think anything I did there or anybody did there was like earth shattering. I hosted shows live every night, getting ready for the games, and then leading up to Cap doing pregame with, at that time, Hollinsworth and Ryan Sandberg. So I would do the shows prior to that, right? Like the news-based show. At that time, it had turned into In the Loop. But that's the whole reason I got into it, right? So it's those moments where, it's the first time you walk into Wrigley Field and you're getting paid and you're like, wow, can't believe I finally got it. It's first time you go to a Bears game and you're like, I'm covering a Bears game. Like, what? Covering Bears Packers at Soldier Field. It's when I had no desire necessarily to ever be a hockey guy, but my first hockey assignment was riding on the championship bus after the second cup with Kane, Crawford, and I can't remember who the other player was.
That probably had to be nuts on that bus.
Oh yeah, that really was. And then I was on it for the third cup, the same bus. Those were cool moments just to see the sea of Chicago sports fans. The Cubs parade was cool. Being there when they clinched the pennant to go to the World Series. I was behind, the bar area, the Budweiser area behind the concessions, behind home plate before any renovation was done. So that was all closed off at that point. I was the only person there doing live shots for live coverage of the postgame show. And so I ran out, watched in the stands the final out, experienced it like a fan, and then ran back and jumped on like 5 seconds later live TV. And I looked down and you can see the sea of fans coming up the streets and the police and everybody just going nuts, but you were glad that you were up above it all, So those are pinnacles, right? Going to I've been to the White House twice. So, it doesn't matter who's in the White House or what your political beliefs are. It shouldn't matter at all if you're going to the White House. I went there once for a documentary I did with Ryan Sandberg. He happened to get invited by President Bush. And so I was there for a wiffle ball game that Rhino managed.
That's kind of cool. That's actually really cool.
Yeah. And it was spur of the moment. Like he asked me to go, and 2 days later, the FBI had done a check on me, and I'm in the White. Actually, That's a picture of us with the White House behind us. That's a picture I had framed because it was like, I'm here with my favorite player of all time, and we're standing in behind the Rose Garden. Like, how did I end up here? You know?
Yeah.
And then went back with the Blackhawks after they won the second cup. So those were cool moments. Low side, gosh, guys. I mean, pick a day from the first.
Yeah.
Pick a day from the first like 7 years, but specifically that first job. I mean, I covered finding dead bodies to like terrible car accidents to standing waist deep in snow and pretending like I'm live, but I'm not live. It snowed so much there that the news director, we had one pickup truck that had a plow on the front of it. And the news director, when they got storms, they would get like 30 inches a weekend. You would get the snowstorm, then you would get the lake effect, and then you would get the second lake effect because there's Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. So they get like 30 inches of snow a weekend. And the news director would have to come in the plow to pick you up at your apartment. Like he'd have to plow the street, lead up to your apartment, you jump in the thing, he'd drive you to where your story was going to be, drop you off, and come pick you up frozen like 2 hours later. That's low. It's low. And then you're doing the news at 11 o'clock at night after he picked you up at 8 in the morning and you froze all day doing the story. Then you're sitting there editing tapes for all these people that are just.
And is that like, so when you were up in Marquette, are you one man banding the whole entire stuff?
Everything. Never had a photographer. Not one day. And it's so far back in the archives that it's back when you had the 3/4 camera, which was like, I don't know, 25, 30 pounds. And then you had a deck, a full size like recording system hanging off the other shoulder and a cable between the two. Okay. This cable was like frayed and old, and there was no replay on the camera. So now if you take your phone and you're like, oh, I got that. I can hear it. I can see it. It's all good. You would drive 3.5 hours in the middle of nowhere on a 2-lane highway, get there, shoot a town hall meeting, drive 3.5 hours back to the station. And if you got there and there was no picture because the cable wasn't working right, or there was no audio because the picture wasn't working right, or the tape crumpled up, they sent your ass back out there to go redo another story. And you'd be like, what's my story? They'd be like, go find one. You worked some 20-hour days where it was just like endless. I probably averaged like at least 60-hour weeks, at least. Yep. You worked 6 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, there was no benefit to it whatsoever because the stories were so bad you couldn't put them on a resume tape.
And it's it's nothing to do with the talent that's doing the story either. It's sometimes you just literally couldn't see it.
Some of it does. I mean,
trust. I don't listen to my early tapes.
There's a difference between my first resume tape and my last resume tape. I will say that. But
you want to hear one of my low points. My first job. All right. So I was at I was a general assignment reporter at the newspaper in Waseca, Illinois, which is just south of Kankakee, middle of nowhere.
Okay.
Like near the border of Indiana and Illinois. And so this is like small town daily newspaper. Like everyone knows everyone. Like if you're in the paper, it's such an honor for so many people. Well, on the front page at the top right corner, they had this thing called the Daily Smile. All right. And so, holy fuck, guys. The amount of times that I had to go out and just ask someone if I could take a picture of them so they could be on this. And again, I wasn't from there. No one knew who I was. Who's the random dude who's asking to take a picture of me? It was the most awkward, weird way to do something. And the amount of times I had to go and do that, I think that was the worst part of that job, was just having to go and do that. And just all I do is take a picture.
That doesn't sound that bad, Cody. I can.
It's not nearly as bad as what you just explained, Luke. But let me tell you, it was just. If anything, it was just the most awkward thing I've ever had to do.
I mean, I had to go drive to militias after the Oklahoma City bombing, and I won't even get it. That was so crazy. we had to go places where there basically was no law and people were cutting down trees, trying to hit our cars. We were like trying to hit the car with full-size trees because they didn't want us on their property. How about, have I told you the one about the bloody golf balls on my neck?
No.
So the first spring that I was there, they sent me out for some like 50-year class reunion in some town of 400, an hour and a half away.
This is in Oklahoma City?
No. This is in Marquette, Michigan.
Oh, in Marquette, Michigan.
Yeah. Okay, so they sent me to another small town up there, like an hour and a half away on one of the millions of lakes that are up there. And they're like, it's a 50-year class reunion. I'm like, okay. I drive up there with my gear. And I was also the weekend weather guy at the time. So this was a little bit further in. And I knew that I needed weather video for my newscast the next day that I thought I could probably fake and be like, hey, what a great week it's been, So I went down to the lake and it was spring there. So now you're talking like June. And the lakes are thawing, right? And these two kids are jumping off a dock into this water that's got to be like 35 degrees. It's got to be just absolutely freezing. And I'm down there on the shore trying to get this cool angle because the bosses all cared about the camera angles. And I keep like, man, the bugs are, swatting my neck. I go up in my white dress shirt and my tie and my suit pants after getting this video to this celebration of a 50-year reunion. And the lady looks at me and her face goes white with like fear. And she's just like, oh my Lord, what happened? I'm like, what? And she's like, your neck. I'm like, what? I kind of grab my neck and I look at my hand and it's covered in blood. It's like I'm in one of those horror movies. My hands are just full of blood. So now she's like, you're bleeding. I'm like, what? They bring me into this restaurant. My shirt is soaked with blood around the back of my neck. It was no-see-um season up there. So these no-see-ums are hatching black flies, little tiny black flies around the lake. And I was allergic to the bites.
Oh, no.
50 times worse than mosquito bite. I got back to the station an hour and a half later, and I had golf balls literally all around my neck. It looked like I had not the mumps, but like literally half-sized golf balls all over my neck.
Wow.
They itched like that for 2 weeks.
That's not a tomato soup bath.
I couldn't do anything. My neck was just like inflamed. They had to lance one. Like the whole thing was, and I was like, this is for $13,000 a year. And I'm not talking sports. When is it enough?
When is it enough?
And that was one of the points I was real close.
Yeah. That would have put me, I feel like that would have put me over the top. But it was all worth it though, right? All worth it.
Yeah, when the Cubs win the World Series, you're like, it was worth it. Actually, even before that, like that, just getting to cover Chicago sports made it worth it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like I covered the Spurs for a championship. It was enjoyable, but it's not my team. Right. Mm-hmm. You get to know the players because you're there every day, but I'm not excited about it like Spurs fans are excited about it. But when the Cubs win, the Bulls win, the Blackhawks win, even the White Sox win, it's an excitement that you can't experience unless you grew up rooting for all of those teams. You just can't. Mm-hmm. If you're not a fan, there's no reason to be in it. And so to be able to cover Chicago sports, whether it's podcasting or television, it's, that's the real deal. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to do it?
Good question. All right. Well, Luke.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, man.
You're giving me the boot, aren't you? That's it. That's the hook. Was it the pussy sores thing from was it the lanced pussy sore that was bleeding on my neck that was what
got me? We'll put a content warning up and then it'll be all right.
Yeah. Nobody's eating breakfast listening to this podcast.
All anymore. I'm saying is when I come in the office tomorrow, if you have a picture, if you happen to have a picture, I'd love to see it.
No, because there were no digital cameras, Cody. There literally was nothing back there.
Yeah.
I have a picture of the snow, which you've seen.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm standing
the
on
snow's literally like as high as you are, man.
My birthday's in March, and it was like 3 feet above me and 3 feet below me.
That's too much. I like a little bit of snow. That's too much snow.
Nah,
that's too much snow.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I feel like the first guest ever on the Tonight Show. You don't know. In 20 years, I could be looking back when I'm in assisted living, saying, "Look at the show I was on one time." Cody will be getting ready for retirement.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll hit up Chris and see if he can get me a partnership with Shady Rays, and
that's right.
Me and Steve will sit here and wear Shady Rays all the time. You know what I mean?
That's a deal right there. Yeah.
Just let me know. So I have to fill out things at the university if
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's a different conversation to get into.
Yeah, right. Get the government involved.
It's always something.
Anyway, it was cool to hear some of the stories, Luke, and because I've told you enough times, it's I got immense respect for you, and
but that's part of why. That's another reason why I joined, Cody, because I knew you had gone through maybe it's not the same story, but I knew you were doing small town stuff. Like I don't say it's the path for everybody. Like going through those trials and tribulations aren't for everybody, but I always have an appreciation for anybody that's willing to do it. Even if they quit at it, if you're willing to do it for a little while, I know what they've gone through, and I appreciate the work ethic and drive it takes to get through it, even though some people will never know it. Some people will never know what it takes to get or took for certain people to get somewhere because it's easy for some people. That's okay. It's a different path for everybody. So if you're out there and you're thinking, I can't do this, it sucks, I'm going nowhere, just remember that your path is different than somebody else's path. And it might take 20 years. It might take 10 years to get where you want to go. But what do I say? So you're saying there's a shot.
You're saying there's a chance.
They could still get Correa, Cody.
Talk myself into it, Luke.
You got a better shot of a lot of other things.
We can talk about that more tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thanks
we
again,
will.
man. I appreciate it.
Thanks
for coming on, Luke.
All right. We got about 13 minutes, Stove. Do we want to talk about Grant Wall first, or do we want to talk about Skip and Shannon going crazy?
I mean, they're both very different conversations. The Grant Wall situation and death is very, very, very sad, as any death is. This one in particular, it was preventable, and in my own opinion. I'm about to get real political in here in a second, so apologize. The World Cup in Qatar should never have happened. FIFA is one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. Grant Wall was doing his job. He was there covering the World Cup and doing a great job at it. Everyone on Twitter was saying he is the soccer voice. He was the American soccer voice. To lose that in a sport that desperately needs it in the United States is a killer. That's a wrong phrase. Is awful for the sport, the growth of the sport. Grant Wall also, the reason people know LeBron James the way that people know LeBron James is because Grant Wall went to Ohio and covered him and called him the chosen one in Ohio. You don't get some of the great soccer stories, some of the great LeBron James stuff, Sports Illustrated, without him. He called out Sports Illustrated too when they were docking pay for no reason. He called out a lot of people on their COVID restrictions or non-restrictions. He called out the World Cup, called out FIFA and Qatari officials in Qatar, and was probably killed for it. That's really where I stand.
No, and that's fine. You're not the only person who thinks that or believes that. Like it, the irony of him passing after getting death threats because he wore, the pride flag shirt or whatever because he was supporting his brother. you can jump to some conclusions there and have, believe that maybe that happened. I guess we'll see whenever like that. Was it?
I don't think we'll ever get the right answers.
You don't think well, it is in Qatar, right? So like they could just, again, more conspiracy theories if you really want to go that far. I'm with you though on like the World Cup shouldn't have been there. And the fact why we're having a world soccer tournament in a country that has all of those issues as far as like human rights. That's I don't like. Well, whose idea was that? Like, who thought like? And I've barely followed the World Cup, so whenever I heard that he passed that night, I learned that same information that's a thing there, and I was like, what were they even thinking? And so like, it was all just kind of like wow, like I can't believe that this happened. So yeah, no. Not only was he a great voice for soccer, he was a great college basketball voice too. Like he did a lot for the industry, man. Like, and it's sad because wasn't even 50 years old when he passed. Like, just some of the best talented people, whether it's this industry or whatever. Like in the last few years, I feel like we have lost so many people that are just immensely talented at what they do, and this guy is now gone for. Feels like it's going to be a controversy for a long time ahead. So
yeah, it's one of those where you have a country that it's illegal to be gay. It's women don't have any rights or very little rights. Migrant workers were being killed or dying building these stadiums in the literal deserts. They built a city in Qatar to have a stadium because of whatever bribes were taken by FIFA, because a country like Qatar does not get the World Cup without that. Yes, there's a lot of things that if FIFA has gone through in the past. There was people that were arrested that were in charge of FIFA by the United States government at one point in time because of all the corruption. That's going to happen again. I don't see why it doesn't when the State Department gets involved in the death of an American journalist pretty quickly in a country that is very secretive. I don't know if we'll ever get 100% right answers or 100% correct. Maybe not right, but 100% answers. But yeah, it's very sad. My thoughts and our thoughts go out to the Wall family. He had a wife. His brother is the one that's kind of been giving out the information a lot.
Yeah.
It's very sad that like you were saying, a talent like that dies early at 49. Not just that, a husband, brother, and just overall seems like overall good person.
Yeah. I think that was the thing too. I saw so many tweets. There were so many journalists that I follow on Twitter that were tweeting about him the night that it happened. And, so many people saying so many nice things about him. And it's just, I didn't get to know him. There's one of the guys who do the CHGO Fire podcast. I think he at least knows him. And I retweeted him the other night just cause I wanted people to see, just something about him because he said something so nice about Grant, and I wanted people to see that just because I obviously I don't know him, but it just sucks, and all I can hope for is that the right answers come out, and but I ain't gonna hold my breath on it, man.
Nope.
Unfortunately. Nope. Let's switch it to something a little bit more comedic, but also kind of like what the fuck, and that's the on-air fight between Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp today. I mean, what the fuck was that, Stove?
I mean, I'm going to be honest.
Straight up, just like
I'm going to be honest.
Just going full on, like just so he can be right, basically insulting Shannon Sharp on national television.
The only time I watch Fox Sports 1 is when they have Big Ten sports or baseball playoffs.
Fair.
Same here. The product on Fox Sports 1 hasn't been that great. They tried, and they're the only show that they have running every day that I know of, at least, is Undisputed with Shannon Sharpe and Skip Bayless. If you have not seen clips of the show, congratulations, because they're literally everywhere every day. I do not like Skip Bayless.
That's fair. A lot of people don't like Skip Bayless.
I didn't like him on ESPN. I don't like him on Fox Sports 1. I don't like the hot take debate style of sports talk in general. Just yelling at each other because someone you think is wrong. Because for lots of, you don't get a point across. You don't have a good conversation. I like hearing conversations.
Yeah.
And then you also get stuff like this, where then something gets taken out of context, or maybe not out of context, and it becomes personal. And when stuff on television and radio becomes personal, that's when you lose the entertainment value. Then goes away. It's then a personal fight, and then it's just gossipy TMZ stuff that you're watching between two sports personalities. And yes, I'm sure that clip has gone viral. It's been on Awful Announcing. It's been pretty much everywhere on Twitter. It very well could have been staged, because that's the way that they work. That's the way that those type of Undisputed First Take type shows work. That's what they do. And it works, I guess, for them. People keep watching, but man, stop yelling.
Yeah.
Like Ed Farmer telling people, stop yelling.
So like the main quote from Shannon Sharpe, and this all has to do with Shannon Sharpe saying that Tom Brady isn't playing well this year, which it's not a hot take to begin with.
That's statistically, he has been pretty mediocre.
Yeah, he's not playing up to Tom Brady standards, right?
Right. This is probably the greatest quarterback of all time we're talking about.
True, right. But here, I'll just read the main quote from Shannon Sharpe. He said, "Skip, I did what I did. You make it seem like I was a bum. I'm in the effing Hall of Fame. I got 3 Super Bowls." And then I think Skip said something along the lines of like, "I don't care." And then Sharpe said, "See what you do? You take personal shots. You would take a personal shot at me. You're willing to take a personal shot at me to say this man is better than me because I say he's playing bad this year." And yeah, so that's basically again, yeah. I'm interested to see if, like, I don't know, they talk about this tomorrow, like at the very beginning of their show, just because, like, I don't know, like the way that Shannon Sharpe responded was reacting.
Shannon's on the show tomorrow.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. Like, again, sometimes people can like clip videos and put them on the internet and make it all come out of context. But like, I looked at Shannon Sharpe's Twitter feed before we did the show, and like he tweeted some clips from their show today, and like, you know, his podcast they does, like there was nothing about Skip Bayless on there. So, you know, like I don't know, but it was just one of the more like wild like interactions between, you know, these popular shows, whether it's FS1 or First Take. And listen, I'll be honest with you, like I don't watch Undisputed, and the only time I really care about looking at anything on First Take is if I know that Stephen A is going to go in on the Cowboys, because I just think that bit is hilarious.
It's a good bit.
It's that, and then I think it always has to do with Stephen A, because I think Stephen A is incredible personally, from the entertainment side. So when
He's
Stephen
embraced
A,
that.
For sure.
He has embraced that.
For sure. But it's either Stephen A and something to do with the Cowboys losing, or Stephen A and what's his other bit? He has another bit. I think I can't think of the other bit, but yeah, mainly I tune in for Stephen A on First Take if I actually do turn it on. And usually it's not even that I'm turning it on. It's more of like I'm just watching the clips on Twitter or Instagram or whatever like that.
I mean, those shows have been made for viral TikTok, Twitter, short form videos.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just very interesting stuff, my man. So, one thing I will say, you know, I don't think that our shows, the CHGO podcasts, I don't think any of us get too hot takey, though someone did get mad at me today in the chat because I said that Wilson Contreras' Players Tribune article was a slap in the face to the fans. And then when I say someone, I think I got a bunch of people telling me that I was wrong about that. But
I will say the Wilson Contreras exit to the division rival, praising everything the division rival does and not really saying anything about the Cubs is an interesting path by him.
Yeah.
When you play them 16 times a year.
Right. And it's going down because the schedule's all changing up. But yeah you know what I mean?
It's an interesting move by him to get into a little sports talky, but yeah, like I said, he's a good player.
No, I think he's a great player.
I think he's a little overrated. That's just me.
Okay.
But he is a good player. I also think because he killed the White Sox whenever they played him, so I think I hate him a little bit more. But again, he's a good player. He'll fit in well. He's going to fit in well in that Cardinals lineup. That Cardinals lineup is really good.
Yeah.
But man, that's both Chicago sports teams. It's like that one meme of the stick figure with the stick poking the dead body. Do something.
Yeah.
That's what it is because both teams they're sitting on their hands. Rick Holland's waiting for the trade market to fall out. Well, Sean Murphy just got traded today, so the big chip is gone. What are you going to do?
Right.
The Cubs have all the money they can want.
Right.
Supposedly.
Well, yeah.
Go Bears.
So, go Bears. Go Justin Fields. All right. I guess that's going to wrap up tonight's show. And to end what we were talking about there, it's more about to go back what you were saying about how you feel like sometimes those shows can purposely stage that shit. Like I don't completely disagree. But I do think that those shows are mainly for like casual fans that are just flipping through the channels.
I agree.
I think anyone who wants really good sports content, you're going to podcasts, you're going
hyper local.
You're definitely going hyper local.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say some of the most criticism that comes to the teams in town has been from, you guys at CHGO and then the local blog podcasts because,
not owned by owners.
Marquee and NBC Sports are owned by the teams.
Yeah, basically.
Or some of the beat writers in the not pockets, but get their information from the teams.
Yeah, so they can only say so much without losing their source, right?
Or they just throw fans on the bus for not showing up to the stadium for a season, even though there's been 2 million people at the Sox this year. But I digress.
Okay. Well, this was fun, man. Shout out to Luke for coming on the show. Got to get to know him a little bit more tonight, which was fun. There's so much more that we probably could have sat here and talked about. So I'm sure maybe sometime down the road we'll have him back on. But I don't know who's coming on next, man. But if you have an idea, that was my idea. He was my idea. If there's someone or if there's someone that I work with that you're interested in, let me know and I'll ask them. You know what I mean? I have that capability. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So
you are in the number 3 market in the country right now. So
I am. Yeah. Feels good to say.
I bet it does.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're following Steve on Twitter at or was it Your Boy Stove? Your Boy Stove on Twitter. Your Boy Stove, and I'm Cody.
It's the one with the blue check for now.
Yeah, he has the blue check mark. I don't. I'm an unverified bad boy, and I refuse to pay $8 to go on Twitter Blue. But he's actually like legit one.
I have legit verification.
Your legit verification. Good for you, man. And follow the podcast on Twitter. It's just connections_pod. Yeah. So we'll see you next time, and peace.